I know I'm talking quite a bit. Can I just talk a little bit about a memory experiment um, that I read about, if it's not too much? Um,
I mean, I've got time if you're good,
Yeah,
Eric.
bring it on, sure.
so I read about an experiment that was done on suggestion and planted memories. And what they did, and what basically, long story short, is they found you could plant a memory in someone, like almost like Inception, as long as you had enough real information to hang it on. And the way they laid out the experiment is they had subjects who agreed, and this was relatively recently, like 21st century after the year 2000. So, people kind of consented to participate in this experiment. But what they did is they had the subjects and they interviewed their families to get some background on their childhood. And what they'd find out something like, okay, when you were a child, you and your best friend used to go to this candy store all the time. It was like your favorite hangout spot. And with this background, they'd meet with the subject and say, and they talk about, hey, do you remember when you were a kid and you had your best friend, you went to the candy store and you hung out? And they'd say, well, do you remember that time you got caught shoplifting? And that's the fake memory that they were trying to implant. And the person would be like, no, that never happened. We didn't shoplift. Like, I don't remember that at all. And they'd be like, okay. And then, they'd have a session for an hour or two just talking about various childhood memories. And then the next week, they'd call that person back and they wouldn't jump directly to, do you remember that time you got caught shoplifting? They'd start with, do you remember last week when we talked about the time you got caught shoplifting? And the person would be like, well, that didn't happen, but I remember you talking about it last week. And basically, over time, after a few weeks, they could gradually introduce this idea where people started believing, like, oh yeah, there was that time when me and my best friend were at the candy store and we got caught shoplifting. That they were able. It took many sessions over several weeks, but they were able to gradually introduce these suggested memories of things that either never happened or originally the person didn't remember. But again, they'd have to have some background. They'd have to know the best friend's name and know that they really did hang out at this candy store. So the whole memory wasn't made up fiction of whole cloth, but they were able to add certain details to something that had enough real memories that it seemed plausible. And I think that kind of fits in because we see when in the again, I get confused, like at the end or the beginning, depending how you look at it. When Teddy suggests that it was Leonard's wife that had, it was Leonard's wife that had diabetes, and that's all the memories of, that's Leonard, that's not Sammy, and we kind of see the memory that Leonard has of, I think we'd previously seen a flashback where he sort of pinches his wife's thigh and she says, ow. And now he's remembering the same memory, but instead of a pinch, it's a needle it's an insulin injection that's making her say, ow. And so I think like if Teddy was one of the police that originally responded to, the incident or was part of the investigating team, that he's kind of known, not from the beginning, but from the incident. He's known Leonard since the incident. And so he would know a lot about the case and know a lot about Leonard and his wife. That, is that something different? So Leonard, if Leonard isn't faking it the way we think Sammy might have been, like if Leonard really has this syndrome, really can't form any new short-term memories, how does that, what does that mean about long-term memories? Is he subject to suggestion? Can those long-term memories be affected, in a purposeful way? Can, maybe Teddy has been trying to, we know Teddy's been using Leonard to kill people. He finds someone with the name John G, and we don't know where John G came from. And it's possible that Teddy has been gunning for this particular drug dealer for a while, and he implanted that idea that the person Leonard is working for has this certain name to target this specific person, or it could just be a coincidence. Just, I mean, that's pretty vague. I mean, if you just say like, oh, any man named John or James with an initial G, that's pretty vague. But we don't know to the extent to which Teddy has been purposely trying to manipulate, not just Teddy's current actions, but not just Leonard's current actions, but also trying to implant long-term memories, trying to affect the things that Leonard does remember from before the incident. So I mean, there is some, there is some studies that show that, if you know enough about a person's background and you have enough time with them, that you can implant something into those long-term memories. And so that's certainly something that makes Teddy.
I haven't heard about that specific study, I don't think, but I have heard about similar studies and they also call into question like police interrogation tactics, because they found that police oftentimes can basically make people remember over a long enough period of time. They can make people question their own memory because the police are pushing so hard to get a confession that completely innocent people do at some point begin to question their own memory and begin to think that maybe they did do it whenever, later on they'll be exonerated through DNA evidence, to prove that they were not there and they didn't do it, but they're through a long enough interrogation time and certain interrogation tactics can implant memories. And the same thing has happened in a few instances with child abuse cases where they will be pushing. I've definitely heard a couple of cases where, someone will go through this and they'll be like, you're repressing these memories. These bad things happen to you. And they'll get to the point that they will physically, they will say, yeah, maybe they did happen. Maybe I was repressing those memories, but in fact, they're actually implanting these new memories into them. And these have happened, more than once. I think that I want to say that there is an episode of Criminal. It's a podcast out there. Thisiscriminal.com. I believe they talked to someone who went through that, who basically for a while believed that his father had, abused him as a child. And then it turned out that no, it's that they had basically convinced him that this happened whenever it really didn't. And even, many, many years later, he still has in the back of his mind that, the memories are still there. They haven't gone away, even though he knows that they're false now, but they haven't completely gone away.
Yeah, memory is really weird when you dig into some of the research. It's really unreliable. There's some really funky stuff that goes along with memory. But kind of just to wrap it all up again, just to summarize my stance is that kind of from what we learn of Leonard's condition in the film, I believe, and I mean that he knows there's so much of that Sammy story that he remembers, that must have been, I think that must have been someone, that was a real case. These are memories that were formed before the incident. So I do think they're separate person, even if there's definitely possibility that there is confusion in Leonard's mind between the facts of his case and, what he remembers of Sammy cases. So yeah, it's not that it is all the gospel truth, but I do think Sammy is a separate real person.